Shio, hia no ik huoduhi. Today is a beautiful day. I'm going to discuss a little bit about verbs and bound pronouns with the verbs. This is not something you're going to encounter in English. It's very complicated to English speakers. Most find it very complicated, but once you figure it out, once it's been explained to you, it's actually quite simple, but it does take a change in worldview. If you remember the video on purple that talks about that worldview, this is another interesting aspect of the worldview of Cherokees that you're going to want to explore perhaps a little bit. In Cherokee, we have very few loose pronouns. In English, we've got the I, me, mines, and all those things that are loose, and they run around very freely, but in Cherokee, they're all bound to the verb. And one of the things that's going to find out very quickly is there are about 10 bound pronouns when you come to the verbs. And we're not going to go into those in this video. This video is just a simple introduction to know which bound pronoun to use when you're looking at a verb. Because most Cherokee word lists, dictionaries, and books only give you the third person, which is a neutral gender bound pronoun. Usually you're going to see it as the oo. Some people pronounce it who, most do. But that bound pronoun, you're going to see that is the third person, or you may see it as some other ones, but we're not going to get into all that. But the basic thing is you're going to learn the third person first, and it's going to be the equivalent in English of somebody running around saying him done it, him picked it up, him read it, him know it, him see it. And we don't want to sound like that when we learn Cherokee. So there's a quick, easy tool to help us learn which of the 10 bound pronouns we're going to be working with in first person and second person and so on. First, the concept you need to think about is, are we talking about volitional or non-volitional? This is where the worldview comes in to be a very important part of the play of it. Now, if it's volitional, it's something I am choosing to do. And that's a list of bound pronouns. I am choosing to do this. It's not something that is happening to me. Whereas non-volitional, I don't have any control over what's happening to me. I can control my response to it, obviously, but it's happening to me. Some people call these, I think this is more confusing, looking at whether the verb is possessing me or if I have possessed the verb. Is this something I've possessed or is it something that's possessing me? And that's a interesting concept to start to deal with as well. For example, let's start out with maybe this word. You've come across it. You're going to hear or see in the word list uyoshiha, which is third person. Remember, it's more like saying him hungry, she hungry. We're not going to do that. He, she, her, him. That's not what we're talking about. First person. It's non-volitional, so it's going to have that ach or agi, ak. Now, depending on the root stems, this second syllable's vowel will change, so you'll use a different symbol. But we're not going to get into all that too. But just for the beginning, if it's non-volitional, it happens to you, the hunger comes over you. It's not really something we choose. I know a lot of us, if we could choose, we would not be hungry anymore, would we? We would choose to avoid being hungry. And so it's definitely a non-volitional thing that happens to us. Now, the next thing is another word. Let's try, I am angry. The anger, now how you respond again is your choice, but the anger, the initial flood of emotion that comes over you, hagi na lunka, ak na lunk, ag na lunk, agi. Again, the agi. Again, this agi indicates this is the first person coming in. The vowel on the second part of the syllable could change depending on what your root is, whether it's a vowel or consonant. But this first part is just indicating it's non-volitional. This is the oo again for the third person, which is going to be in your word list. So that helps you when you see a word that starts with oo, you know it's a vowel. You know there's 10 other starts, but which ones do you use? Is it non-volitional? You go with the ak. So what if it's volitional? Something that you choose. We'll get there. But right now we're going to talk about hungry, agi yoshiha. Angry, agi nalunk. Ak nilunk. Ak nalunk. You're going to hear it. Thirsty. The thirst comes over you. Now you have some control over this because you might not be drinking enough water. But suppose, you know, that we're going to ignore that part and just think about the actual thirst comes over you. You don't choose to be thirsty. It happens to you. Ak tadegi, and there's our glottal stop. Ah. When you see a glottal stop, just for a quick note, swallow. And that'll make your glottal stop. Ak tadegi. Ah. Now remember, oo indicates that third person, but we're just trying to figure out which of the categories. How do we spell this? If it's non-volitional, we're going to go in those ahs and ak, that ak sound. And again, now this experiment shows, I mentioned earlier, sometimes instead of agi, in this case we've got ag, and it goes into octade. That's an important change. Also, if you've got two vowels together, it may change actually to qua. You can get into that real. I'm sorry, going too far. We'll back up. I know this is supposed to be an intro, so I'll back off of that. How about non-volitionals? We leave them for a minute and go to volitional. Volitional, I understand. Again, this is the worldview of the Cherokee. Hunger is non-volitional. Thirst is non-volitional. But understanding is something you choose to do. Z is going to be your first person. I didn't write your third persons out because we're really not worrying about that because you can find those in most any word list. But I understand. Zigoli ga. And then the ah is on the back of that. Just to indicate that. The ga is the present tense right now. Z. Z is not separate from this except when it's an onomatopoeia and a few other instances. But in this case, it should be connected. I just left the space so you could see where it falls in the word. Z. I understand. It's a bound pronoun. Goes with it. But it indicates this is first person, this is a volitional, I'm sorry. This is volitional, not a non-volitional. I'm saying that backwards. Now, another word is I speak. Nobody's got their hand up my back like a puppet. No one's got their hand up my spine and making me talk. I'm running my mouth all on my own here. Ziwoni ha, siwoni ha, siwoni ha. Z is the bound pronoun to woni, won, and this means that I've chosen to speak. It's volitional, Z. I read. Now, again, volitional. This is not the word that refers to somebody who's picked up a book and is looking at the same paragraph and the same page over and over and over, not getting anything. They're actually choosing to see each syllable, each word, to understand it, to think about it. They're engaged in their reading. Their eyes are moving. They are involved. This is totally volitional. I read. Zigoli ah. Zigoli ah. I am reading this. Reading involves, you see the root of understandings in there too, right? Okay, so when you come across a third person word list, which most all dictionaries and word lists are third person because they're trying to save space. It's not really, I don't think it's anybody trying to trip you up and laugh at you for not knowing later, although some people feel that it seems like that sometimes. But it helps you to know whether you're looking at volitional or non-volitional, or that confusing possessing, possessed. I prefer volitional, non-volitional. Once you know that, you know what your first person pronoun is going to be, which category you're going to start it, and that will go a long way to helping you learn those spelling rules for the 10 different bound pronouns of each one. So yes, there's 10 volitional bound pronouns, and there's 10 non-volitional bound pronouns. And short of memorizing them, how will you know? Here's my trick. What's the worldview of the Cherokee? Is this a volitional act? Or is this something that happens to you? Non-volitional. and then you'll know which first person pronoun to use. Now, this is kind of sliding out of use, unfortunately, I think, because it's a beautiful part of the Cherokee language, and it's sliding out of use because of the influence of English. It's sliding out of use because of the lack of understanding of how the verbs were done. And language does change over time, but I think this is an important one that helps with the speaking. And yeah, sure, if you use volitional when you should have used non-volitional, people are still going to understand you, but they're also going to notice that you're not being quite as precise as the old-time speakers were. And when you come across this in books and writings that are more than 100 years old, you're definitely going to see that they use this strictly and they follow the rules. So being aware of it will help you out. And I think this will be a good thing for you and for all of us as we are learning this language and trying to do it justice and bring it to the beauty and fullness that existed before things were brought out of context with English. And English has invaded it so badly that it makes it complicated for us to learn to speak it. But again, like I said, this is something that will make it easier for you when you see word lists of those 10 volitional bound pronouns or those other set of 10 non-volitional bound pronouns, and it will help you to begin to understand the language and to speak and sound more proficient. Thanks for listening. Shki, thanks. Shki.